This is Arise America.
Say that I was a drum major for justice. Say that I was a drum major for peace. I was a drum major for righteousness.
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivering a sermon he called the Drum Major Instinct. Now, King delivered it exactly 2 months before he was assassinated. In his words to the congregants, he explained how he wanted to be remembered at his funeral. It was fairly prophetic. And we have 4 people with us to discuss how Dr. King's religious beliefs and faith played a role in the civil rights movement. Reverend Scott Stearman of Metro Baptist Church, Reverend Dr. Deborah Jenkins of Faith at Work Christian Church, Marc Greenberg of Interfaith Assembly for Homelessness and Housing, and Reverend Juan Carlos Ruiz of the New Sanctuary Coalition. Thank you so much for joining us. My first question to all of you, if you could answer it briefly, is how did Dr. King's religious conviction inform your work? We'll start with you.
Well, we know that Dr. King stood for the values of standing with those who are poor, standing with those who are marginalized. He put his life on the line and ultimately gave the ultimate price. And that's what I think all of our faith traditions call us to do. To be courageous and stand with those who are struggling. And so he's inspired my work and my work with faith groups and advocacy groups to say that is what we're called to do. That we are called to stand with those who are struggling, to find ways of creating justice with our partners so that people can live full lives, live the life that God has put them on this earth to live.
Do you see it in those terms as well?
I do. Additionally, I hail from Montgomery, Alabama, lived around the corner from where he stayed briefly, near Alabama State University, and so my parents were a big part of the movement, the boycott of the buses in Montgomery, and so I was raised knowing about Dr. King from a very personal perspective of my parents, and then coming here to New York, being a young person. A person of faith always, but just seeing the disparities even more glaring in a lot of ways here in New York, he influenced me because he helps keep me balanced in
even today.
Even today, because my father was a fighter. You know, and so if there was a problem during Jim Crow era, he was out there. My mother, she's the mild one. So Dr. King presents that dichotomy that helps keep me balanced. But to have suffered as much as he did, it helps me to do the work that I do on behalf of others. So I'm always mindful of the whole nonviolence approach because that's not instinctively what I would choose. So. And
what about you?
So I grew up in a Southern Baptist setting in rural Oklahoma. And in the 70s, even, Martin Luther King was a hero even in this very white setting for preaching about love. And that was what it was about that I learned as a young person. And in this setting, religion was mostly about saving souls that would go to heaven. And if I could say this, it sounds critical now, but basically ignoring the plight of most of your neighbors while you do that. Yeah. And so as I got older, I began to realize the kind of love that MLK preached was a little more complicated than what I learned as a kid.
Right? Much more complicated?
Well, it was much more robust, let's put it that way, because it actually was a love that forced you to pay attention to those neighbors. Why were they poor? Why were the schools substandard? Why, asking these questions was a part of the love that he actually advocated. And of course, at the end of his life, I think even addressed inequality and questions of war in a way that was very different than my religious tradition was willing to ask those questions. So,
and what about you?
At the heart of Martin King Jr. Is this prophetic call that is very much appealing to me, to my imagination, to my faith. And it's an all-embracing prophetic call. We as church people, I think, sometimes are very limited and constrained to this idea of charity, of looking at the person as somebody that we need, that needs to be saving. And, we approach the work sometimes like that. And I think Martin Luther King didn't, though there are versions that we try to water him down to that, I think he was very much a challenge in his day to the institutions. And right now, I think it's a critical, radical message for us. And I think that really pushes us, at least for myself being an immigrant, this new kind of citizenship. So it's a tune well known, yet a tune that it's far-reaching and beyond what we sometimes experience or are constrained by our religious beliefs.
It's interesting, your work right now with immigrants is really politicized, and there are so many religious institutions that don't want to touch politics at all, but we do have, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, who was a religious man, but he was also a political activist. Today, what role do you believe that religion plays in activism? We'll start with
being part of the movements here in the city, we are seen as kind of in a very skeptical light.
Skeptical?
Very much. So I think because I think the religious right have really done well in terms of organizing and infusing their views and their politics very much with this sense that religiosity doesn't have much to do with politics, and that has been really a disservice, because what differentiates us from from animals is that sense of that we can enter into the world of politics, because animals are social beings. We are the ones who are political. And I mean, we just celebrated Easter and the crucifixion and that kind of stuff, which are major mysteries in our Christian life. And it was done so, the cross and resurrection are very much a part of this mystery that we call life for us. And we cannot separate that.
If we could turn to the black churches right now, they really fueled, in many ways, the civil rights movement. Do you believe they are as powerful today as they were then?
I do not.
You do not believe that they're as powerful?
I do not. We are very, as the black church, we're very involved, but we're also very strategic in leading from the front. Unlike they did in the 50s and the 60s, the church led. And the civil rights movement was as successful as it was because of the church body. Now we're very calculating. Even here locally in New York City, there are things that are happening with housing that there will be some black churches to never speak out against the deplorable living conditions of New York City Housing Authority residents. Why? Because they're calculating, and I'm one who's willing to go for broke, because that is how I believe God would have me do it, following the footsteps of Jesus as well as Dr. Martin Luther King. You have to be willing to lose everything. If that means funding, then you have to be willing to lose it to take a stand for righteousness against injustice.
You have to be willing to lose everything. Right now, there are so many movements that appear to be coalescing in some ways. You have the Me Too movement, you have the gay rights movement. Do you think that religion has a role in those movements as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. What the religion brings, of course, is faith, obviously, and I'm not one that thinks you have to have faith in God to have faith in progress, but I do think it is faith brings a sort of motivation for people to recognize that as you apply work, the work of bringing homes to the homeless, the work of bringing food to those who are hungry, the work of bringing education to those who are illiterate, that kind of work produces progress. And you have to have faith to believe that progress matters and that human beings matter to do that kind of work. And religion writ large has, at its best, always taught that and practiced that, from the prophets Isaiah and Micah to Jesus and to MLK, who I'd call a contemporary prophet.
The contemporary prophet. Has he informed any specific decisions in your life and in your work?
Well, I think that Dr. King's had a vision. I have a dream. And his dream implied that it was a dream not just for him, but for all of us. And I think what faith says to us not only that we have a vision, but that we're all connected. That people of faith and people of no faith are all part of one family. And I think what the faith community can do is provide the language to the larger movements, the language of values to the larger social justice movements. And there's an incredible potential power when we join together, because people of faith need to understand what change looks like, and people of social justice movements need to be able to use the language of faith and of values to enhance their efforts. And I think when we join together, as we're doing now, beyond the constraints of definitions of faith communities, we are, I think, people who are coming together with a vision and acknowledging that we're all in this together. And I think the key is, it isn't that when one suffers less, I suffer more. I think when one suffers less, we all suffer less.
Thank you very much. So inspiring to hear your words. I want to thank everyone. Reverend Scott Stearman of the Metro Baptist Church, Reverend Dr. Deborah Jenkins of Faith at Work Christian Church, Marc Greenberg of Interfaith Assembly for Homelessness and Housing, and the Reverend Juan Carlos Ruiz of the New Sanctuary Coalition. Thank you so much for sharing the language of faith and how Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. inspired your work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we leave you with words Dr. King said in 1963 that still resonate today. He said, quote, "Nothing in the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." Thank you for letting us inform you every day. In New York, I'm Duarte Geraldino. We'll see you tomorrow.
Yes, if you want to say that I was a drum major, say that I was a drum major for justice. Say that I was a drum major for peace. I was a drum major for righteousness.
Hello, my name is Sherry Richardson, and I'm a segment producer for Arise America. On this day, 50 years ago, the world lost a hero who fought for our equal rights, our civil rights, and one of my favorite rights is the right to vote. If you don't exercise that right, then you lose all claim to complain about anything. So exercise the right to vote.
Hello, my name is Shannon Lanier, and I am the co-host of Arise 360. And I think Martin Luther King Jr. stands as a great example to me as an equality advocate to do the best I can every single day.
My name is Madison Lanier, and Martin Luther King is he is a great man.
Hi, my name is Aki Somalopa. I'm a producer here at Arise News. And when I think of Dr. King, I'm reminded of his quote, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." This is a reminder that the road of life is long and you have to stay the course through the ups and downs of life.
He made black people and white people go to the same school, and black people and white people go on the same buses, and black people and white people drink at the same water fountains.
My name is Duarte Geraldino, and I'm the anchor of Arise America. I'm always so inspired by Dr. King because based on everything that I understand about him, he physically was not a big man, but he had such a big heart and sense of purpose that in life and in death, he inspired so many people to fight for justice.
And there was this guy who shot him because he didn't like his plans. And so Martin Luther died.
My name is Jessica White, a producer here at Arise 360. Dr. King embodied the dream of nonviolent protest. He lets you know that you can fight with your words and that your actions can make a demand on all those around you. Keep living the dream.
This is Arise America.